The girl caught everyone's attention during the flight because of her strange behavior. The constant hum of the Boeing 737's engines filled the cabin with a familiar, almost hypnotic noise as the plane cruised through the night sky. The passengers, each immersed in their own flight routines, formed a mosaic of lives and stories. Some slept peacefully, others fiddled with their phones, watched movies, or exchanged occasional words with their seatmates. Michael, a flight attendant with over a decade of experience, walked down the aisle, observing discreetly as always. He was skilled at noticing subtle details, a fidgeting gesture, a glance that spoke louder than words. It was a kind of sixth sense he had developed over the years, and tonight it was on high alert. As he passed through the central aisle, his eyes landed on a little girl no older than 7, sitting beside a man who appeared to be her father. Something about her caught his attention immediately. She had light brown hair tied in 2 messy braids and wore a blue dress that seemed too big for her. Her small hands clutched a well-worn teddy bear, missing some of its stuffing. But it was her expression that stood out. She stared straight ahead, her wide eyes filled with a kind of fear that seemed to pierce through the space around her. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and she bit her lip hard, as though trying to keep something from escaping. Beside her, the man, rigid in posture, wore dark clothing and was completely absorbed in his phone, his cold demeanor etched into his face. Michael stopped beside them, offering a professional smile. "Good evening. Is everything okay here? Can I get you anything?" The little girl slowly lifted her gaze, almost as if afraid to make eye contact. Then, in a nearly imperceptible motion, she moved her lips without making a sound. "Help me." Michael froze for a fraction of a second. He tried to mask his reaction, keeping his smile in place. That silent plea hit him like a shockwave, but he knew he couldn't show it. "If you need anything, just let me know, okay?" he said calmly before walking away. As he made his way back to the galley, the scene replayed in his mind. He couldn't have imagined it. That wasn't a random motion or a vacant stare. The girl was trying to say something, but what? Michael continued to observe discreetly. Each time he passed by, he noticed the girl remained tense, her shoulders hunched, and her hands gripping the teddy bear tightly. The man beside her showed no interest in her, no conversation, no gestures of affection or concern. Halfway through the flight, while serving drinks, Michael saw another opportunity. He approached with a cup of juice in hand. The girl looked as pale as before. "Hi, sweetheart. Would you like some juice? Are you feeling okay?" Before she could respond, the man looked up, his glare sharp and icy. "She's fine," he said curtly, almost irritated. "And no, she doesn't want anything." Michael kept his professional composure, but a knot formed in his stomach. The man's cold, intimidating gaze and clipped tone made it clear he didn't want any further interaction. Michael nodded, thanked him, and returned to the galley, trying to piece together his thoughts. Shortly after, as he stowed away the carts, he felt a small tug on his sleeve. He turned and found the girl standing there, small and fragile, holding something in her hands. Her father was distracted, unaware of her absence. Before Michael could say anything, she slipped a folded piece of paper into his hand and quickly ran back to her seat, sitting down as if nothing had happened. Michael glanced around, trying to appear natural, and carefully unfolded the note. The words, scrawled in shaky, childlike handwriting, made his heart race. "I'm not his." He reread the note, his mind spinning. What was going on? If she wasn't his daughter, then who was he? And why was she with him? Michael felt the weight of responsibility press down on him. Something was very wrong, and he knew he had to act. But how? They were thousands of feet in the air, confined to a flying metal tube, with no immediate way to intervene. Any rash action could endanger everyone on board, especially the girl. He needed to be smart, cautious, and swift. Pocketing the note, Michael made a decision. He had to alert the crew and find a way to involve the authorities before the flight landed in Portland. As Michael returned to the aisle, he cast one last glance at the girl. She was sitting still, but her eyes met his for a brief moment. In that instant, he realized there was something different about her. Hope. He couldn't let her down. Michael went back to the galley and discreetly called Sarah, the head of the crew. She was a middle-aged woman, experienced and always calm under pressure. He knew he would need her for whatever decision he had to make. "Sarah, I need to talk to you. It's serious," he said in a low but firm tone. She raised an eyebrow and followed him to a more secluded corner of the kitchen. "What happened?" Michael pulled a note from his pocket and handed it to her, explaining in detail everything he had observed. The girl's nervous behavior, the man's aloofness, and the silent plea for help. Sarah read the words on the paper and frowned, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We need to be careful," she said, handing back the note. "If this is what it seems, we can't risk confronting the man here. We need to verify who they are and ensure the authorities are ready when we land. Michael nodded, but the question still weighed heavily on him. What if it was already too late? Okay, let's start with the basics, Sarah continued. I'll check the passenger manifest and try to cross-reference their information. In the meantime, keep your eyes open but don't draw attention. Michael returned to the aisle, now on high alert. He watched as the man closed his phone and spent a few minutes rummaging through a small backpack under the seat. The girl remained motionless, her eyes fixed on her teddy bear, but her fingers betrayed her anxiety, gripping the toy so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, Sarah was reviewing the records on the crew's tablet. According to the manifest, the man's name was Andrew Collins, and the girl was listed as Emma Collins, his daughter. The two were traveling with tickets issued under the same family name, but that didn't prove anything. Children could be registered with false names, and the man's cold demeanor was already a sign that something wasn't right. Back in the cabin, Michael noticed an opportune moment. The man seemed drowsy, leaning back in his seat, while Emma remained still but alert. Michael walked past their row, making a subtle gesture to catch the girl's attention, which she followed with her eyes. Michael entered the lavatory, leaving the door slightly ajar. Moments later, he heard small footsteps approaching. He looked into the mirror and saw Emma standing there, hesitant but determined. "Hi," he said, keeping his tone calm. "It's okay, you can tell me what's going on. I'm here to help you." The girl glanced around, checking to make sure they weren't being watched, before whispering, "He took me. He's not my dad." Michael's heart sank. "Who is he?" "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice trembling. "He said I had to stay quiet, that if I screamed, my mom would get hurt." Michael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Does your mom know where you are?" Emma shook her head. "I was with her, but he showed up and I don't know how I got here." Michael gently touched the girl's shoulder. "Listen, Emma, you're very brave. I promise we'll get you back to your mum. But for now, you need to go back to your seat, okay? Pretend nothing is wrong. Trust me." Emma hesitated, but eventually nodded. She silently returned to her seat, while Michael gathered his courage for what lay ahead. Back in the galley, Sarah was waiting with additional information. "I've already contacted the captain," she said. "He'll notify the authorities in Portland. Police will be waiting at the gate when we land." "But what if he realizes something's wrong and tries to run before that?" Michael asked, restless. Sarah considered for a moment. "We'll increase surveillance. He won't be able to move without someone from the crew noticing." Michael knew it would take more than that. He decided to keep Andrew under constant observation, even if it meant walking the aisle more frequently than usual. As the flight continued, Andrew's behavior began to change. Perhaps he sensed that something was off, as he now looked around frequently, his shoulders tense. Michael knew he was walking a fine line. Any misstep could put Emma in even greater danger. Just before landing, Andrew called Michael over with an abrupt gesture. He tried to stay calm as he approached. "When we land, I need to get out quickly," Andrew said. "We're late to meet someone. Can you help with the bags?" "Of course," Michael replied, feigning a smile. But inside, he was on alert. Andrew was up to something. The final minutes of the flight felt like an eternity. When the plane finally touched down, Michael exchanged a glance with Sarah, who subtly signaled that everything was ready. The police would be waiting outside, but the most critical moment would be disembarking without Andrew realizing the trap. As passengers began to stand, Andrew grabbed Emma by the arm. The girl looked at Michael with pleading eyes but said nothing. "It's now or never," Michael thought, positioning himself in the aisle. The tension inside the plane was almost tangible to Michael. As passengers reached for their carry-ons and prepared to leave, he kept his eyes fixed on Andrew and Emma. Every movement seemed charged with intent, as if the man already sensed something was amiss. Andrew held Emma's arm firmly, keeping her close. Small and fragile, she seemed even smaller under his shadow. But there was something in her gaze that said she trusted Michael. That gave him the strength to push forward. Sarah approached with rehearsed casualness. She spoke quietly but firmly. "The police are at the gate, and the captain has ordered a delay in the disembarkation process to keep this man under observation. We need to ensure he doesn't suspect anything until it's too late." Michael nodded, but he knew the reality was more complicated. Andrew's behavior was shifting. He now appeared restless, glancing around as if searching for an escape. The plan had to be flawless. When the plane came to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign turned off, Andrew stood abruptly, pulling Emma with him. He looked directly at Michael. "We're getting off quickly," Andrew said, his tone firm, almost commanding. Michael, keeping his calm demeanor, partially blocked the aisle with a service cart, pretending to arrange something. "Oh, sir, we need to wait for the main door to be cleared. Just a moment, please." Andrew narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Others are already leaving," Michael smiled, though his heart pounded. "Security protocols. The crew ensures priority passengers have a smooth exit. I promise it won't take long. Andrew hesitated, but didn't push further. He pulled Emma closer, murmuring something too low for Michael to catch. Moments later, Sarah appeared at the cabin door, gesturing discreetly to Michael. The police were in position outside. The moment had come. "Mr. Collins," Sarah said firmly but politely, "before disembarking, we need you to wait a moment. There's a security check related to the passenger manifest." Andrew froze, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Security check? Why? I wasn't informed about this." "These are random procedures," Sarah replied smoothly, but Michael could see Andrew's unease growing. Suddenly, Andrew stepped back, gripping Emma even tighter. "This is ridiculous. We're leaving now." Michael saw the girl stumble, nearly falling as Andrew held her roughly. That was all he needed to act. "Sir, release the girl now," Michael said, his voice finally showing the gravity of the situation. Andrew turned to him, his eyes filled with anger and desperation. "You don't know what you're talking about. She's my daughter. This has nothing to do with you." Before Michael could respond, Andrew tried to shove past him to reach the aisle. But Michael was ready. He blocked the man with the service cart as Sarah pressed the emergency call button to alert security. In the commotion, Emma managed to break free and ran toward Michael, clutching his legs. "Please, don't let him take me," she cried, her words echoing through the cabin. The other passengers, who had been confused about the delay until then, began to realize what was happening. A buzz of activity filled the plane, with murmurs and expressions of surprise. Andrew, seeing there was no way out, tried to run for the exit, but at that moment, the door opened and 2 police officers entered the aircraft. "Andrew Collins, drop the bag and put your hands up," ordered one of the officers, pointing at him. Andrew hesitated for a moment, but in a desperate act, he tried to shove one of the officers to make a way through. That's when Michael, without a second thought, grabbed the man's backpack and yanked it hard, throwing him off balance. This gave the officers enough time to detain him. "You'll pay for this," Andrew yelled as he was handcuffed. He looked at Emma, now hiding behind Michael, and shouted, "You don't know what you're doing, girl. You'll regret it." Michael felt a chill run through him at the words, but stood firm. He looked at Emma, who was trembling with fear, and gently pulled her into a hug. "It's over," he said in a reassuring tone. "You're safe now." As Andrew was escorted out by the officers, the cabin fell silent. Many passengers watched the scene with looks of shock and relief. Some even began to clap softly as they pieced together what had happened. Michael glanced at Sarah, who was now standing next to Emma, offering her a tissue to wipe her tears. "What happens now?" he asked. "They're bringing her mother here," Sarah replied with a faint smile. "She's been located and is on her way to the airport. She won't be long." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew it wasn't truly over yet. The most important moment was still ahead. The waiting area at Portland Airport was bustling with hurried passengers, but in a reserved corner, protected by the police, Michael stayed close to Emma. The girl was still clutching her teddy bear, holding it even tighter to her chest, but her expression was no longer one of pure terror. Instead, it was a mix of exhaustion and relief, as though she was slowly processing everything that had just happened. "Is my mom really coming?" she asked softly, her anxious eyes fixed on Michael. Michael knelt to her level. "Yes, Emma, she's already on her way. I promised you'd be safe, and now we're going to make sure you're back with her." Emma nodded, but her face was still full of uncertainty. It was hard for someone so young to fully grasp what had happened. Meanwhile, the police had taken over the case. Andrew Collins was being interrogated in the airport security office. Authorities confirmed that Emma had been reported missing by her mother 2 days earlier. The details were still unclear, but the most important part was resolved. Emma was safe. A few minutes later, the sound of hurried footsteps drew Michael's attention. A woman with dark brown hair and tearful eyes entered the terminal, accompanied by an officer. The moment she saw Emma, she let out a sob, tears streaming freely down her face. "Emma!" The girl looked up and seemed frozen for a moment. Then, in a burst, she dropped the teddy bear and ran toward the woman. "Mommy!" The embrace that followed was one of such intensity that words could barely describe it. The mother fell to her knees, holding her daughter as if she never wanted to let go. They cried together, and Emma whispered over and over, "I knew you'd come, Mommy, I knew it." Michael, watching closely, felt his own eyes well up with tears. That moment made every second of tension and fear on the plane worthwhile. Emma's mother looked up at Michael, still holding her daughter tightly. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can never thank you enough for this." Michael shook his head, trying to keep his composure. "I just did what anyone would do. The important thing is she's safe now." The police approached to explain the next steps to the mother. There would be formalities to handle, and she would need to give a statement, but none of that seemed to matter in that moment. All she wanted was to never let her daughter go again. Michael decided to give them a moment of privacy and walked over to the terminal window, watching the planes arrive and depart. The adrenaline from what had just happened was still coursing through him, but now it was mixed with a sense of accomplishment. He had made a difference, not just on another day at work, but in someone's life. Sarah approached him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You did an amazing job today, Michael." "Thank you, Sarah," he replied, still gazing at the brightly lit runway. "I just hope she can grow up without carrying too much of this trauma." Sarah smiled. With her mom by her side, "I think Emma will be okay. And thanks to you, she has a real chance now." The rest of the crew began gathering for the transport back to the hotel. But before leaving, Michael glanced one last time at Emma and her mom. The little girl turned and waved at him with a small smile. Michael returned the gesture, feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew that while this was just one story among so many that unfolded every day, for Emma and her mother, it meant everything. Hours later, back at the hotel, Michael reflected on the day as he looked out over the brightly lit city of Portland through his room window. Working as a flight attendant had always given him a unique perspective on people's lives, but rarely did he have the chance to change the course of a story so directly. That night would not be forgotten, not by him, nor by Emma. What would you have done in Michael's shoes? Leave your opinion in the comments. We hope you enjoyed this touching story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to catch more stories like this, full of suspense, emotion, and hopeful endings. Check out the videos on the screen to explore more incredible tales. See you in the next video.